You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, apologies if my voice is a bit croaky. I've got a summer cold. Watched Hitman last night. Really enjoyed it. I was a bit unsure for the first half. It was a lot wackier and zanier than I thought it would be. I hadn't read anything about the movie, and in retrospect, it's like, it's a Linklater movie. It feels like a Linklater movie for the most part. But for some reason, I had it in my head that this was going to be like, Fincher's The Killer or Le Samurai or something like that, like a more kind of somber meditation on, well, for starters, I thought it was going to be about Hitman, which it's not. But then I guess it starts, the first third or maybe even half of the movie is very zany and wacky. Like reminded me of Community a little bit, the energy of it, just like very, very, very wacky, lots of costumes and accents and montages, and nothing has any gravity. He's putting away people, but it doesn't feel like they're going to come back and get him, or there doesn't feel like there's any jeopardy. It just feels like it's a bit of a screwball comedy almost. And also it's got that voiceover, which is more prominent in the beginning of the movie than the rest of it. I think it kind of awkwardly pops up one other time in the middle of the movie, and it was like, kind of reminded me of, I think it's the first Spider-Man movie where it was just a voiceover at the beginning and the end, and felt kind of out of place when it came back. But yeah, it was caught me off guard, and I wasn't crazy about that. Like, it took me a while to get onto solid footing. When it becomes a thriller, then I really, really liked it. Still wouldn't put it amongst his best by any means. I think with Linklater, half the time I'm going into his movies expecting like a masterpiece, because his if you look at his career and you look at the movies he's made, he's got so many masterpieces that you kind of put him up there in that camp of like the greats. But then half the time I'm kind of watching his movies not expecting much, and that's usually when I'm blown away. It's less than a month since I've seen Apollo 10.5, which is all voiceover, like literally the entire movie. And yeah, that movie absolutely blew me away. I'd probably give that 5 stars. So this one kind of arrived on the heels of that, and I was really, really sort of hyped for it. But yeah, ended up coming away thinking it's kind of a lesser Linklater for me, but still really good. What's the man called? Glenn Howard? I'm thinking the Always Sunny guy is Glenn as well, isn't he? Is he Howerton and this guy's Powell? Anyway, he's really good. He's like a charisma machine. The girl was good as well. Probably the best I've seen her, but he's got the more challenging part. Good kind of chemistry between them. And who I really liked was the guy who's kind of like the slime ball co-worker guy. He was fantastic. I've seen him in one other movie. I've looked him up on IMDb now, and I've learned that he's a major character in The Walking Dead. But I've never seen that. I mean, I think I've seen like the first few episodes or maybe even the first season, but for the most part, I haven't really watched The Walking Dead. And that seems to be his biggest kind of thing to date. But I've seen him in one or two other movies, and he's absolutely fantastic. Like he's really, but just he creates so much of the drama in the movie hinges upon how he's playing that part in terms of like closing in on the guy, and he just absolutely nails it. And there was a few bits like that towards the end where he comes up with that plan to have your man wear a wire and surprise her, and like, you know, you're like, how the hell is he going to get out of this? That was fantastic. The actual way the way he did get out of it, I was like, oh yeah, of course you could just do that, and yeah, I guess it's actually not that precarious a situation. But going into it, I was like, what the fuck is going to happen now? It's kind of creeps up on you, that sort of like really almost Hitchcockian thriller, and the mixing of the fantasy, like fake alter ego, with him actually potentially having to get his hands dirty and stuff like that. Yeah, it eventually became like a good movie, like a really enjoyable movie. I was just a bit maybe on the wrong, maybe it's because I avoided knowing what it was, like knowing anything about it for so long, and also because I've just come to expect a specific thing from Hitman movies. But yeah, good flick. Just try to think if there's any other stray observations I had about it. Yeah, doesn't come to mind. But yeah, another good one for Linklater. I think out of the 90s American indie crew, Kevin Smith, Tarantino, Soderbergh, he's like been one of the most consistent at this point, especially when you look at the diversity of his career. Like he's done all sorts of different movies, and he's rarely delivered a dud. I wasn't crazy about Bernie. I think that's the Jack Black one, which I think you liked more. But yeah, many of his movies I adore and consider like all-time classics, and then pretty much everything I'm a fan of at this point. Even ones like Waking Life, where it's taken a while to get my head around it, but I'm now a fan of. Another thing I noticed is that he co-wrote it with this Glenn guy. It reminded me, at least the sequels to Before Sunrise are co-written by Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke. And I'm not sure if he's done that more in his career, but it's a pretty good idea, really. I mean, like this Glenn guy who's now like becoming like a Hollywood heartthrob, who I noticed was in Everybody Wants Some, and maybe Linklater kind of ushered him into Hollywood. I know he's a small role in Apollo 10.5, but yeah, if you take someone who's like got a lot of potential and is like very talented, but you know, is generally going to be getting more sort of lackluster parts, and then you sit down with them and like, okay, you're going to craft this part from the ground up with me, you're probably going to get the best possible performance you could out of them. So yeah, that was another cool aspect of it. Anyway, what do you think?
Hey man, just getting back to you now on my walk. You didn't sound too croaky at all, so that lemon and tea must have helped. And first of all, this Glenn guy, you need to put some respect on Glenn Powell's mouth, my friend. This guy is, I'm talking like I've been championing him for years and years. I haven't, but I've been really enjoying his performances for a fair bit. Like he was in Richard Linklater's Everybody Wants Some, and apparently he's in The Dark Knight Rises as a trader, whatever that is, maybe in Wall Street, like in a minor role. But I think Glenn Powell is like a hybrid of Matthew McConaughey meets Tom Cruise, and apparently there's been some rumors that Tom Cruise has been taking them under his wing, both figuratively and literally, considering he was in, what was that movie, Maverick. And in Maverick, he is kind of Tom Cruise's heir apparent, and you could kind of see a little bit of a Jerry Maguire in him, couldn't he, as well, with that smile and that, I think he said, like, bags of charisma or whatever he said. Like, you can really see it. My prediction with Glenn Powell is, and people have been saying as well, oh, this is a Glennaissance. And I'm like, no, it's not the same thing as the reconnaissance, as people put it, because Glenn Powell is a guy that's been on the fringes for quite a long time now. And like my prediction between this and I think Twisters is going to do really well. I don't know why, but maybe it's people are starved by superhero movies and whatnot, that something about tornadoes is going to get that kind of bump now. And I think it's going to do really well, and it's going to make him bankable as like a Hollywood star. And this movie really showcases so many things he can do. And like in Maverick is where I first really sparked it in a big way. Like, this guy is big Hollywood lead material, and maybe that era is gone now, but maybe someone like this guy can come along and revitalize it. And you mentioned that Linklater works with like his actors in terms of writing, like giving them writing credit, like the Before Sunset trilogy. I don't know if anybody had it in Bernie or things like that, but or Boyhood, should I say, and movies like that. But it is interesting. Like, does he give actors a lot of freedom, and that's where they get the credit, or do they sit down writing it together? And in the case of this movie, like, it's a proper star vehicle for Glenn Powell. Like, you can imagine this movie in the 90s, and it has this kind of out of sight vibe, where it's like, okay, two like Hollywood, like classically, well, I guess it's the woman, I can't remember her name, but she's probably not a classical Hollywood lead, but she is that kind of like really attractive foil that has like a lot of charisma and a lot of like sexy chemistry for a romantic lead. Like, you can imagine this in an out of sight, like George Clooney, Jennifer Lopez movie in the 90s, and then this absolutely blasting Glenn Powell to superstardom. Now, that mightn't happen in the same way now because it's on Netflix, and like it won't have the same reach, and there's just so many different movies. But like you said, he actually wrote this with Richard Linklater, and I wouldn't be surprised if like it had it in mind like as a star vehicle, because we get to see comedic Glenn Powell, we get to see a Jerry Maguire Glenn Powell, we get to see these noisy people now, hold on, yeah, like we get to see a kind of like a kind of pin nerd Glenn Powell who's like awkward. We get to see like an action star Glenn Powell. Like, the movie is literally built around everything this guy can do, and he can do it quite seamlessly. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and we're going to be hearing a lot about Glenn Powell.
Hello, no one is available to take your call. Please leave a message after the tone.
And in terms of the movie itself, I didn't know anything about it either, and it took me a while to get my foot in as well. I'd recently seen The Killers, and I was thinking, okay, is this going to be Linklater's version of like an existential, almost like a Jesse from Before Sunset walking around the city trying to like contemplate whether he should kill this guy or not? Is that what we're going to get? Like, what are we going to get here? And like you were saying with The Samurai as well, is it going to be there was a lot of speculation going on with me as well in terms of what this movie is going to be. And like you, I think it's brilliant to go on blind, actually. Like, I started watching it, and it took me a few minutes to get what was going on. So he's acting a hitman, but he's not a policeman. He's not actually a cop either. And it's got that fun kind of voiceover where he's saying, well, here's what I used to do, and it's not quite that way, and it's very slick, and it took me a while to kind of come to terms with what kind of movie is this. And for a minute I was thinking, it kind of like you mentioned Community, is this going to be a zany type like Linklater movie where this guy can do anything from like the Newton Boys, Tape, Scanner Darkly. Like you said, he's been around for a long time and he's consistent. And the plot of this movie is essentially like a very standard rom-com type of story. A guy lies to a girl about his identity and about something else, and it's about that uncovered. Now that plot is so fucking stale in general, and it's almost like one of my most hated kind of plot lines, and it's quite boring. You'll probably see that in an episode of like any teen drama as well, or any teen comedy. But with this, like there's some very nice Linklater dust sprinkled all over it, in terms of when he's doing that philosophical seminar, and it's kind of like, oh, if you could be anyone else, then the sense of self and how long between you act this way then you become this way, and that kind of Linklater dust over these very standard romantic comedy elements and other elements as well, like when it becomes a thriller later on, as you said, that it just really adds so much more to it. And it just goes to show you, like, mainstream movies are lacking so many ideas to hold like absolute bullshit genre movies together, that if you just sprinkle a little bit of something different over it, in terms of that central question, like how much of you is you, and then you put it into this element of this genre, which is a romantic comedy for a while, and then it gets quite like it reminded me of Out of Sight a bit, and even when it ratchets it up and it gets a bit like, oh, this is getting a bit serious now, and then you see him merge into two characters, and not in the kind of way of something like Glass. Is it Glass? No, Split, with the personalities in James McAvoy, or these kind of movies where someone has a split personality. No, we have to see this person acting, who is an actor, like by trade in real life. We have to watch him act as someone else and see the change in personality, not in a schizophrenic way, but in terms of just by trying to act someone. We have to buy that he's, I can't remember what his actual name was, but Ron was his alter ego, and we have to see him merging into Ron, but as an acting performance, both physically and literally. And then we've got the boy that he's actually transforming into this guy, and pieces of him is being fractured by acting as someone else. Like, it's a pretty cool conceit. And then I got very totally on board at a certain point, maybe a similar point of view as you. I was thinking, okay, this is more Bernie, this is more School of Rock type comedy. However, it has a backdrop of a really kind of intense thriller that creeps up on you, where you're enjoying this is great fun, and then all of a sudden it's like, how is he going to get out of this? Well, I'm taking this seriously, how he's going to get out of this now. This is pretty amazing. And in terms of that guy from The Walking Dead as well, like, as much as his character is like the linchpin for all the drama, and he's very like, sniff bullshit, my friend. And as much as I enjoyed his performance, in a movie where people are literally acting as different people, this might sound strange to say, but I very much enjoyed him as a character in the movie. But anytime he is doing stuff, I'm very much aware that this is someone acting as opposed to a real character. Like, I think he went a little bit zany, and that might be very like zany and costumey, and that might be very strange in a movie where Glenn Powell is literally switching between different people. Some of them absolutely extremely for laughs, and some of them like you can buy as real characters. Whereas this guy was very dress-uppy, and it was a little bit distracting. But I agree with you in terms of how good he was in terms of like the character in the world itself, how he brought everything together, and he's very smart as well. He could easily be a very kind of hickish, which he looks like exterior wise, and that was probably the costume department. You need to be this kind of burn out cap, but yeah, he really adds to the drama, like how smart he is when he shows up at the woman's house and whatnot as well. Yeah, he's brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. Glenn Powell's definitely the real deal. He's like, I think Top Gun Maverick and this combined sort of solidifies it for me. I do think it's premature to make Tom Cruise comparisons, just because Cruise is, I think, on another level of charisma, and I'm talking about the first few decades of Cruise's career, because now he's gone like that. Watching the latest, was it Dead Reckoning Part 1, like that I just thought, okay, he's not bringing the goods anymore. But if you look at like Rain Man, Color of Money, Jerry Maguire, stuff like that, like that thing where he's like kind of hateable, but because he's just green behind the ears and he's lost, and then he comes good, and that whole like character arc that he delivers so well through his performance, I think Glenn Powell's just a bit too smarmy for that so far in what I've seen. Now, it could be proven wrong by future performances, but I haven't seen something that makes me think he could do Jerry Maguire, which I think is like another level of superstardom. But he's brilliant. Haven't seen that much with him, but this one definitely upped my appreciation massively. I think it's a great opportunity for him to have like a great director give him the ability to like craft a character from the ground up. He had that romantic comedy out recently, which I'm not sure how well it did, but it was definitely like quite a high profile movie. And then obviously, like you said, Twisters. So it's definitely, if he doesn't become a star after this summer, then you know that's it. But interestingly, I don't think he's done any superhero stuff. So like the next logical step, and I'm sure he's being courted constantly, would be to take on a major superhero role. So hopefully he doesn't do that, because then that's just him. That's it. That he's sewn up with that for years. What's the other thing I was thinking? Got off my head now. But yeah, let me think. Yeah, it's I've seen you've dropped in a couple more voice notes, so let me respond to those. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't have that kind of friction with the way that other cop, the kind of antagonist cop, was portrayed. You know, he's like the way you're saying that it's an archetype, it's pushed, it's a bit kind of zany or whatever. I felt like pretty much everything in the film was heightened to the same point. Like, for example, the girl, the sort of femme fatale of the piece, she's like laying it on so thick with the kind of sexy, like dangerous, exotic, like it feels like a performance that is not rooted in reality. I'm not saying it's complete, it's not like a cartoon, but it's definitely a step away from, let's say, the Before trilogy or Boyhood, which feel much more realistic. This is a bit more elevated. You mentioned School of Rock. I don't think this movie is that similar to School of Rock, but it's similar in that regard, in terms of like the way people act is to serve this particular heightened tone that we're presenting, rather than like how someone actually would behave. So he felt consistent in that regard for me. The acting thing of like Glenn Powell, if that's his name, having to switch back and forth, like I thought the stuff where he's doing high camp, where it's the Russian accent or the Michael Caine version, like that stuff I didn't like. I thought that was too far. It was a bit ridiculous to me. It was like, I'm not buying, even in the universe of this movie, that they would allow him to go so artificial, because it's like, it's like SNL territory. Whereas the Ron Gary juxtaposition, that was fantastic, and that was like completely, I mean, it was fairly believable. Because we know Glenn Powell, and we know that Ron is the way that we're used to seeing Glenn Powell, like super charismatic, super charming, in control, all that kind of stuff. And it's the Gary that's more of the like, maybe more of a stretch or something like that. It felt, I don't know, there was a bit of a breaking the fourth wall type of thing going on in my head with that. But still, like you said, just getting to see him having to switch performances mid-scene. Like they did good physical, subtle stuff with his hair and stuff, but then when you actually get to see him sort of break character and switch in that scene where it's revealed that she's killed someone, that was brilliant. And that's like a dream part. Like he'll never get something on this level of, let me just write from the ground up a vehicle that does everything it can to show the world what I've got. I'm not saying that was necessarily Linklater's motivation when he latched onto this story, but from an actor's perspective and like an aspiring movie star's perspective, it's an absolute dream opportunity, and I think he completely smashed it. The other interesting thing about the movie is, at the beginning, it said these events are somewhat true. And now, even if I would start a movie and it says the following is a true story or anything like that, I'm still thinking like, this is bullshit. Like this didn't really happen the way I'm about to see it. It's like when I go on Wikipedia later, the real story is going to be so different from this that it renders what I'm about to watch as complete fiction. But still, even having that kind of cynicism about so-called true stories or based on true stories, I still feel like there's certain lines that they wouldn't cross. Like there's certain, like for example, they wouldn't make the main character die if he didn't die, or get caught if he didn't get caught, or whatever. So I was thinking, what I'm watching is 90% Linklater having fun, but it will be somewhat restricted by what actually happened. So the whole way through I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, so now he's getting involved in dodgy stuff, right? He's crossing at least legal lines, if not ethical lines. So that means that he definitely gets caught and he goes to prison, because otherwise we wouldn't know about this, right? There's no way we would know the true story if it was all, everything he's up to was ultimately kept secret. And that left me with this kind of thing. I hate watching movies where I kind of felt this way with Ambulance recently, where I feel like what I'm watching is a doomed mission, especially like, it's okay if it's like Apocalypse Now or something like that, where it's like, it's all about like the dark, heavy weight of like, we're heading to our doom or whatever. But when it's more of like a fun movie that you're kind of invested in the main character and you're like wanting them to succeed, but you look at the kind of makeup of the situation, like the stakes, like they're surrounded by so much like SWAT teams or whatever it might be, and you go, they can't make it out of this unless it's some really cheap bullshit. So you're kind of, I don't know, for me, that I find that like kind of annoying. So towards the end of the movie, I'm like just waiting, when are they going to get caught? Like he's giving that his final like university lecture that we see him give. I'm just waiting for, at the top of the kind of university auditorium or whatever, that for like a whole bunch of police to start spilling in. And I'm actually doing the math in my head. I'm like, what's the thing that got him caught? Like how's he gonna get caught, or like what's the evidence or whatever, because he seems to have kind of cleaned everything up. And then at the end in the closing credits, it says like dedicated to the real person, Gary, whatever his name was. I'm like, oh, dedicated to him, dedicated to this guy. murderer, but okay. And then it calls him like an absolute legend or something. I'm like, this is very interestingly opinionated in terms of like, we've decided to kind of morally exonerate this guy who certainly by most people's moral compasses would, be a very, very odd choice for the protagonist of a movie. But then they reveal in the closing credits that, they made up the whole murder thing. So like I just think it's a great idea for a movie to take a real person. It doesn't have to be like super famous person like Napoleon or something. Just like a real person, any level of famousness, and then just make up a film noir plot and this is what might have happened had they been involved in like a film noir plot. And that's, I don't know, I thought that was really cool, and it was like a real nice surprise at the end. But good movie overall. Let's try to think if there's anything else that I had in mind about it. Maybe more stuff will come to me, but yeah, enjoyed it. And it's another, like, you're listing the Linklater credits there. Like, it's nice that he keeps on adding slightly different feathers to his cap.
The person you are calling is unable to take your call. Please leave your message after the tone.
Oh yeah, the one other thing. When he's in that scene where he's holding up the phone, telling her context, but they're both acting and pretending that that they're that they don't know each other, or blah, 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 blah. It's going so well and it's going so amazingly, and it's such a exultant moment for both of them. I was sure that at the end of that scene she was supposed to say, "Get out of here, Gary," or something, like say his real name.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm not saying that he is as good as Tom Cruise. I'm just saying that it's been a while since I've seen a movie star, like a new one. I know he's like 35, but he just feels like a proper movie star, What else were you saying? Yeah, it's funny, when the credit sequence came up and it said, like, this is kind of true, I feel like that allowed me to say, well, I don't give a fuck if it's true. Like you said, when that's like, if it's a true story and that kind of ruins the movie for you. We were thinking, what did that happen? It's like, now how would that happen there now? But when it playfully says something along the lines of, this is kind of true, I'm like, well, I don't need to worry about that then. And in a movie where everyone is kind of big and it's very cartoonish at times, I'm not worried about that very early in the movie. And in fact, the placard or the title screen, combined with the tone of the start, the zany tone of the start at the start, that put that to bed as far as I was concerned. So I didn't really think of it at all. So I don't know if that was the intention of it or not. But the other thing is, I think the same person that wrote an article about this man wrote the article about Bernie, which is also a true story. So Linklater probably has a thing for this area and this type of story. But it is great when someone's going to be saying along the lines of, we're just going to run with this. I think Don Cheadle did it with, was it Miles Davis or James Brown? I think it was Miles Davis. Where he's like, there's enough documentaries, there's enough biopics, I'm just going to run with it. And at the end of the day, why not take something like a story that inspires you to make an absolute crazy liberty in terms of things that didn't happen and so far from what happened that, it's a far more entertaining story for it. Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned the scene with Glenn Powell and, God, her name's not coming to me. where he goes into the house, and there's that great kind of phone tango, if you will. But just before that, there's a scene, I think, the last time they seen themselves, where Gary comes out. And if you remember the movie True Lies, where Bill Paxton plays this guy who's actually, I think he's pretending to be a secret agent, maybe not a hitman, but definitely a secret agent. And when his veil drops and he's just completely wimpy, like, in a way, the tone of the scene is quite similar when he drops his veil and he becomes Gary, and he's like, "What? You kill someone? Oh my God!" But it's the strength of the acting in that scene that it doesn't feel like someone dropping an act as much as the real person coming out. And I don't know if I'm clarifying the distinction, but in True Lies, or when characters in other movies, when they drop that mystique, it's almost completely for laughs, in terms of, oh, this guy's a wimp, and now you can see the real him. And this is just like, he effortlessly transitioned into Ron, out of Ron into Gary, and that was a great scene. But back to the phone tango scene. Yeah, that works really well. And I was watching that with my partner, and I had the same thought as you, actually, where I was expecting the same thing of, like, see you later, Gary. Well, my partner actually thought that it was going to be filmed in the end, and I didn't think he was going to get away with it either. But what that scene does brilliantly is that when Ron has lost his mystique, so to speak, and he's quite, not to say dweeby, but he's certainly the opposite of Ron, that scene is brilliant in reigniting their chemistry and reigniting in how she would still be attracted to him, because he is coming up with a plan. He is trying to get her out of it, and in that scene it's blurred between he is Gary and Ron, and she's very attracted to how he's coming up with a solution for this situation, and you can see her in her eyes, like, the lust is back for him, and she's really enjoying this. And so that scene is absolutely pivotal. And yeah, how it ended was a bit weird, actually, in terms of, and maybe the film expects you to be on board with the fact that the cops are going to come and take him from the lecture hall, and something's going to happen, and he's like, well, that's how I ended up in prison. That's how I met your mother, kid. But it never happens, and then it steps out, and then he has a daughter, and it's actually like 5 years later. And then they're sitting down at the dinner table, and I don't know, that scene felt weird to me. Like, it's fine, and I really enjoyed the movie, but I guess that was the way the book ended, where they're talking about the love story, and now they're acting a role as who they are now, their parents, and that's the role they're acting, and maybe it bookends it in a way. That's the point of that scene, but it was very, like, strange. But yeah, really enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, I also found the ending a bit strange, a bit, like, ill-fitting to the movie. I mean, her character is really cool because it's like the classic, can you trust her? Is she, you know, she's obviously, like, very attractive, and she's, like, exciting to him. She's a way for him to step outside of his quite banal life, but she also has this sort of danger factor of, like, is she on the level? Is she actually like a psycho? Like, is she calculating? And when they start raising questions about, like, she was doing it for the insurance money and stuff like that, that all seems to track. You're like, okay, cool. She's like a classic femme fatale. By the end of the movie, and really through not much of a kind of arc, but just an instant sort of flash forward, we're just supposed to take her as, like, she's just like a good, decent, like, she's his wife, and you know, there's no skeleton in the closet or anything like that. It just felt a bit too neat. I think I would have preferred I don't know, something else to happen, because the way the movie presents the end of the film is that he has an idyllic life, and I don't think we've got there with her in the movie. I don't think we've got to the point where we're like, she is, this was one little sort of dodgy thing she got involved with, but like she's a decent, good person other than that. I'm still, by the end of the movie, like more going, well, she probably was trying to kill that guy for the insurance money, or she might have killed other people, or she could kill him, or like she's got that danger factor, which is a great part of the character, but by the end of the movie, I don't think that's been dispelled. So it feels like a weird button, especially seeing as it's like such a jump forward in time. They've obviously become incredibly wealthy, and you don't know whether that's the insurance policy or just, you know, the passage of time. We're not told the details. So yeah, I like the idea of they ended up together, but I just felt it was just a little bit too hastily done. Yeah, that phone, that scene where where he's having to kind of win her back over as Gary, as Ron, and the whole kind of layered thing. It's really good. I just feel like the film takes a little bit too long to get to the good stuff. The beginning, I mean, I'm curious to know how long it was, but I'd say at least 45 minutes. Really had nothing to do with her. The scene where he first meets her, which is, you mentioned Out of Sight, like it's kind of this movie's version of Clooney and Lopez in the trunk of the car. It's that scene where, the thing we're watching now is just the chemistry between these two people. That scene where he first sits down with her is really good. And it's the beginning of the plot of the movie, essentially. Like everything up to then, it's just been like, okay, this is the situation. This is who he is. This is what he does. This is his life. But the kind of big catalyst for the story is that meeting. And I felt like that could have come earlier, because I had sort of settled into a lesser movie by that point, because it'd been so long, where it was just like montage of him doing his thing. And yeah, I don't know. It's felt a little disjointed in that regard, just a little bit too much wacky, lighthearted comedy beforehand. It is interesting that the way watching it straight after, or a month after Apollo 10.5, and just going straight back into this voiceover thing. I felt more like I was listening to the voice of Linklater, as opposed to, if you just randomly saw this movie on Netflix, I think it wouldn't seem very like auteur. It would feel very like, this is a pretty studio-ish movie, like to a high caliber, but there is a certain amount of his stamp on it. It's interesting it's set in New Orleans as well, because I think most of his stuff's set in Texas, and I don't know if Glenn Powell's from Texas, but I think he is. He sounds quite Texan, so I guess it's a true story, so that's probably why they had to set it there. Although technically they didn't, because, you know, it's not actually a true story. It's also like a rare New Orleans movie that doesn't lean into the sort of touristy New Orleans-ness, which is kind of cool. Yeah, good flick. I guess there's not much else to say about it, but makes me want to go in and fill in the blanks. There's quite a few Linklater films that I haven't seen, some of which you mentioned there. I don't think I've actually ever seen Tape. I remember when it came out being quite like interested in it, because I love like phone booth and all these movies that are just set in one location and are really stripped down and almost like an experiment in minimalism. So maybe that'll be a new one, one for me to hit soon.
Yeah, just to pick up your point about the Adria Adjano performance. Now that I've actually looked up her name, that didn't come to me at all in my memory. I had to look it up. Regarding the ending, I think in terms of the pacing, it's a big problem, because like you said, I was doubting if she had this planned, if she was the type to kill her husband for insurance, if she was going to turn on Glenn Powell's character, like it is that femme fatale that keeps you guessing.
And so when you see the turnaround where they're all living happily ever after, it feels disjointed from a pacing point of view, but from the film's own kind of central message and question of, if you start playing a role long enough, do you become that person? Well, at this point where it's picked up, she's got 2 kids now. She's been playing the role of family woman and mother for, I guess, about 5 or 6 years. So in the same way that Glenn Powell's character played like Ron for like a few months, and he became him. I guess the movie is expecting you to believe that that's why she's probably calmed down, and that's why it's changed, because now she's played the role of mother so long that she's merged into that person, as opposed to the dangerous woman who killed her husband and did all these other things. So it tracks from a movie point of view, but it just doesn't track in terms of the abruptness of the turnaround. Tape might be a good one to do next, or just to watch in general. I've either seen it when it first came out or never seen it, so either way I'll be going to it fresh. But Linklater is always, it's always going to be interesting what he's done, or going back in his catalogue.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hadn't really considered the kind of theory of, can you change yourself? Can you change who you are in a period of time, as it pertains to her? I'd only kind of looked at that as a discussion of his character arc. But yeah, if you go, yeah, she was in that place. We see her in this very, very specific place in her life in the movie, and then now we're flashing forward to see what it's possible to accomplish when you sort of attempt to be another person. Then that definitely kind of backs up the ending of the movie a bit more. Like, I guess you're raising it with me as picked up the slack of what the movie could have done with a little bit more work potentially. But yeah, I guess it's not a particularly serious movie. It's kind of it's fair enough for it to sort of just drop you in with or leave you off with a good sentiment, and yeah, it's probably not expecting you to ask too many questions of that ending. But yeah, whole thing, bit shaggy, bit loose, bit unrefined, but some really, really good things in it, like the development of Glenn Powell as a character, as an actor, and the lion's share of the runtime of the movie is like a good, solid thriller, which actually surprised me in terms of, obviously Linklater we know as being like somebody who's more making these almost like improvisational dramas and kind of loose character studies. I was actually surprised with his ability in this film to engineer a fairly tight little thriller, like Hitchcockian thriller at some point. But yeah, it's a good grab bag of good things, and I had a really good time with it. It's very easy to watch, so yeah, definitely on board for checking out Tape. Maybe that's the next one to do.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.